When it comes to your retirement, do you want to have the same old plan everyone else has? Of course not. You're unique and have your own goals and dreams. Don't be treated just like a number. This is your retirement. So it's time to think differently. And you're in luck because you've found the Retire Your Way podcast with ILG Financial. At ILG Financial, you won't find generic, run-of-the-mill plans containing the same old cookie-cutter solutions. Dave Chase and the ILG Financial team focus on building one retirement at a time using their Think Differently philosophy. And that means your own comprehensive plan with customized solutions built to achieve just one goal, yours. So put on your Think Differently hats and get ready to take back control of your retirement today and for all the tomorrows to come. ILG Financial's Retire Your Way podcast was created just for you, and it's starting right now.
Welcome to another edition of the Retire Your Way podcast with Dave Lopez, ILG Financial, wherever you are in the Stafford, Virginia area. ILG Financial can help you get to and through retirement. And today, on our episode today, we're going to talk about something very important, healthcare in retirement and how much you can expect to spend. First of all, Dave, it is good to be with you.
You too, Ron. We were just talking before we went on air. It is just so good every a couple weeks to get back on the phone with you. I just enjoy our conversations, both on and off the air, but I like to have as many of them on the air as possible, and that's what we're going to do today.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, we all know that the chance of needing some kind of health care and some point in retirement is pretty high. And we've talked about that a lot in previous podcasts. As we get older, it's only natural that new health care bills are going to present themselves. When discussing retirement, a lot of times we just focus on the planning of potential long-term care assistance, but it's important to really plan for how much you'll likely need to spend on your general health care. Dave, let's talk about all that in just a moment here, but let me put your phone number out there for folks who'd like to get in touch with you and have a one-on-one conversation. 540-720-5656. That is 540-720-5656. That number is for ILG Financial. You can have a conversation with Dave Lopez. Dave, what exactly do we need to plan for? What should we expect in terms of total cost in health care? And what do we need to know as we get ready for retirement?
Well, boy, that's a lot of questions you've given to me. So thanks, Ron, for setting me up here for I'll try to keep that now from being a 4-hour podcast. So we'll hit the highlights. How does that sound?
Sorry about that. I was just so excited about the topic. There's so much ground to cover.
No worries. And you're right. We have touched on these topics in previous episodes, but they were usually peripheral, if you recall. Today we're just going to focus on this one topic. When planning for retirement, sometimes we have to take a look at some of the not so exciting things that will require not only our attention, but are going to require our money, right? And they're not fun to talk about, and healthcare cost absolutely fits into that category, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It sure does. So, and if you fail to prepare for it, it's going to be big trouble for you.
It's true. We were joking that you've got a thunderstorm coming, right?
Yep.
And health care costs for retirees are the same way. You can deny the storm's coming. It doesn't stop the storm from coming. That's so right. You can either prepare for it, or you can pretend it's not happening until a disaster strikes. And today we're going to talk about how to prepare for what may be an eventuality, an extra cost in retirements. We're going to talk about what it is. So how much should we actually expect to spend in health care in retirement? You've known me long enough to know what my answer to this is going to be. Let's take a look at the numbers, right?
Yep, exactly.
But as we do this, remember that even though numbers today, I'm going to tell you right up front, they're going to seem very intimidating and daunting and very high. But the numbers we talk about today, it does not necessarily have to be a negative or a troublesome part of your retirement, Ron, as long as, and this is the big if, as long as you have a plan in place. Does that make sense?
That always seems to make sense. You know, as long as you have a plan in place, you can be ready for anything if it's prepared properly.
Yeah, so my message today is hold on, don't get intimidated by some of these numbers. because at the end here, we're going to talk about how to put a plan in place to take care of them, because there is a solution. And we have so many solutions through ILG Financial that there really is a solution regardless of your financial position. It's just different solutions for different people. Okay, so here's the numbers. You know me, I'm a numbers guy.
Yep.
Healthcare costs in retirement, Ron, climb year after year after year. So don't base your numbers on what your mom paid 10 years ago in her last 10 years of her life. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
A 65-year-old couple retiring this year, let's say 2022, can expect to spend an average of, now get this, $315,000 in medical expenses throughout retirement.
Wow.
That's costs you're pretty much not spending now. Now here's the big kicker. That's about a 5% increase from last year. Now, that's over double the number from 2002. Now, here's why, to me, that's so significant. If you're listening to this and you're 65, a lot of your health care costs aren't going to come for about 10 years. So if we have that same percentage increase over the next 10 years, right, that we had over the last 20 years, right, by the time you're 75 or 85, we could be at $700,000 for those costs because of inflation and price increases. So now, here's another thing that most people miss. These expenses we're discussing are expenses you're going to have to pay even if you have Medicare and health care coverage, right? It's not, don't worry, Medicare and health care insurance covers this. This is your portion of those bills.
This is over and above what Medicare covers.
Yeah, a lot of people think, hey, once I'm on Medicare, all my health care is free, but that is absolutely not the case. Let me give you a quick elaboration. Just as a reminder, we'll touch on it in a moment, but Medicare is basically just an insurance policy. It's broken into three parts. Part A, which covers basically if you go into the hospital. That's free, and it covers Part A, but it doesn't cover all of it. Part B covers your doctor visits and your lab work and things like that. And just like your regular insurance, there's co-pays and co-insurance that you pay for that stuff. And then Part D is prescription drugs. And just like your prescription drug coverage for most people, you pay a portion, and then the company pays a portion. So we'll talk a little bit about more of that. And then in addition to that, there are portions that regular health insurance covers that Medicare doesn't. And then we'll talk also about Medicare supplement insurance, which is an extra insurance policy to fill some of the gaps.
Wow. This conversation is just really jolting, if you haven't really thought about this in this way. I mean, you talk about all these expenses in addition to what Medicare is going to take care of, and that's a really scary thought. You can see how healthcare costs would come as a huge shock to couples who thought that having Medicare was their healthcare planning in retirement, and how that could really throw a wrench into their retirement planning for all other areas of their lives as well.
You're exactly right. And all roads lead back to having the data and making a plan. So increasing health care costs are the number one, we're going back to data, increasing health care costs are the number one reason for personal bankruptcies in the United States. Were you aware of that?
Yep, I've heard that before, and it's really, kind of disgusting, actually.
Yeah, and it's just imagine it's a tragedy. It's a major barrier for retirement securities. Imagine you planned everything right. You've got your income lined up, and, you and your wife think everything's going to be great, but then, God forbid, one or both of you have some major medical bills, and they just drain the money you had planned for this wonderful retirement life, and now you're living hand to fist. Right? Is it hand to fist or hand to foot? I can never remember.
I think it's hand to fist, but I'm not sure.
You're scrimping by now because the money you had planned to enjoy retirement just evaporated in healthcare costs.
Yeah,
right?
And all because you did not plan for medical care.
That's exactly right. You just assumed that wasn't going to happen. And it's very easy for people to do. I hear it all the time. They're like, sometimes they're very flippant about it. They'll go, you know what, I'm not worrying about it. If that happens to me, take me in the backyard and shoot me.
Yeah.
And we joke about that because they make light of it. But the reality is that's their way of saying it's too big of an issue. I'm going to pretend it's not happening. Like that storm that's coming your way.
Right.
It's just too overwhelming. Let's just pretend the storm's not going to happen. And if it happens, I'll take the consequences. Well, the consequences can be a ruining of your retirement. Give you an example. A 2022 study just came out, and it broke down some of the costs that you're looking at in retirement that are associated with health care.
Okay.
So let's take a look. Assume you're a 65-year-old couple. Assume you're retiring this year in 2022. You're enrolled in traditional Medicare, Part A, Part B, and Part D, the ones we just talked about, correct?
Right.
So here's some of the costs. Medicare Part A is free, I told you that. Part B charges a monthly premium, comes usually out of your Social Security check, and as long as you're a married couple and your income is under $182,000 a year, you pay the least amount, which is $170 roughly a month each. Mm-hmm. So that's $340 a month for Part B. Mm-hmm. And it covers just some. So that's part of that cost is the premium for Medicare Part B. Now, it's a quick note here. If you're fortunate enough to have income over $182,000, you pay more for Part B. So not only do you pay higher taxes, we call this a hidden tax. You have a surcharge to your Medicare Part B, and they go up significantly as you make more income. So some of the income planning we do for our clients in retirement is if they're around this number, to try to do strategies to keep their reportable income under 182 so they can save a fortune on Medicare Part B. But let's assume for today the couple's paying $340 a month for Part B. Okay, that's not a game changer.
Yeah.
Part A is free.
So much strategy involved in all of this kind of stuff, and it applies to medical care costs as well.
It absolutely. It all intertwines. Social Security is the same way. Your tax on Social Security, a lot of people don't even know in retirement it's different. Some people pay no tax on their Social Security. Some people pay tax on 50% of their Social Security. Some people pay tax on 85%. Mm-hmm. The difference is how much income you have coming in. So you want to plan around these numbers to try to save that money. But you have to know it's a problem before you can work on a solution.
Exactly, yeah.
So Part B, let's assume $340. If you're listening, write $340 down on a piece of paper. Part A is free. Part D is really just prescription drug coverage, right? And that costs roughly anywhere from about $40 to about $150 a month. Depending on the level of RX coverage, prescription coverage you want. You can pick, right? So the one that costs more costs a little more. So let's just assume on the low end that you're each paying, let's say, $75 each a month for Part D. So Medicare is going to cost you $340 a couple for Part B, $150 for both of you to have Part D. That's just shy of $500 a month for your Medicare coverage. Mm-hmm. Now, that does not include additional insurance that covers what they call the gaps that Medicare doesn't cover. You'll hear that referred to as Medicare gap coverage, or it's often referred to as Medicare supplement plans. They just cover what Medicare doesn't cover. And those plans, on average, run about $70 to $250 a month.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so let's assume the low end. Let's say $100 a month extra each for supplement coverage. Now you're looking at about $700 a month currently, goes up every year, is a pretty good estimate for a couple for Medicare and a Medicare supplement plan to give them insurance about like they're used to in their working years with insurance. So that's, $700 a month. We're looking at, what's that, about $8,400 a year?
Yeah. We're really, these numbers are really starting to add up.
Yeah, now that's just the insurance. We haven't paid for any of the, you still have to pay co-pays for doctor visits, co-insurance. You've heard of 80-20 plans, right? So, you pay part, and if you have to, be in the hospital or if you have medical tests or stuff, right? Co-pays for your prescription drugs, right? All of that is additional that most people pay now, even though they have traditional insurance. And, that all goes into that huge number of extra costs in health care. Wow. Now, here's the biggie. Yeah. And this is the one that's new as you go into retirement. Mm-hmm. These estimates do not in any way cover any additional costs for what's called long-term care, meaning someone has to come into your home and help you, right? In-home care, that's called. Or if you have to go into a facility, your insurance will cover the actual medical costs, right, like lab work and if you go in the hospital and your doctor visits. But it does not cover the cost of someone taking care of you because you need assistance, long-term care assistance, in-home or facility. And
I think it's safe to say that some of the people listening to this may have assumed that this long-term care issue would be taken care of by all that other stuff. But as you're saying, these estimates don't include long-term care, and that's something that everybody needs to worry about.
It is, and it's a huge expense for long-term care, depending on if you need in-home or facility care. So this is a big part of that cost that can wipe out a plan that someone's built, because it can, like we said above, it's $350,000 in retirement that you didn't plan on spending.
Yeah, and as we've discussed before, I think it's 70% of us are going to need long-term care of some kind.
Yeah, that's the current estimates, that if you make it to 65, you have roughly a 70% chance. 7 in 10 chance that you'll need either in-home care, someone to come into your house and help take care of you a few days a week or every day, or you have to go into a facility. Yeah. Now, it gets worse. If you're a married couple and you combine that, this is just the math geek in me, you have over a 90% chance that at least one of you will need care. So think about this. What else financially in your life over the last 40 years, Ron, have you feeling like you had a 90% chance this bill was going to come that you didn't plan for it? Imagine sending your 3 kids to college and saying, well, that's pretty much a 90+% chance we'll have to pay tuition because only a small chance they'll get a scholarship. Should we plan for it, or should we just pretend it's not going to happen and be surprised if they don't get the scholarship?
I think we should definitely plan for it and be ready.
The challenge is, that's obvious, right? Yeah. People say, well, that's a silly comparison. The only difference in those comparisons is you're very aware of the cost of college, and you're very aware of the 90 to 95% chance that you got to pay for it. Up until maybe this podcast, most people had no idea of these numbers, that a married couple has, on high end, a 90% chance, if they're lucky enough to live a long, happy life in retirement, of needing that extra cost.
Yeah.
So that's what today's about. Now we know. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the one side is, the good news is now you know the numbers. The bad news is now you got to plan for it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're listening to the Retire Your Way podcast with Dave Lopez. We're talking about long-term care expenses and healthcare costs in retirement. It definitely is safe to say that this should be an expense that those in or close to retirement should really be putting some money away for. You can't just ignore the fact that it's there. It's there whether you think about it or not, and Dave Lopez can help you take care of that problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you mentioned our phone number. Always remember that anybody at any time, you can just log right onto our site, which is www.ilgfinancial.com. We have just a plethora of information on that site about all topics financial, including healthcare, and all of it's free to anybody who logs on. You can also reach out through that site and just click a button if you want someone to reach out to you and set up a time to talk to me directly or to Chase, anybody on our team.
Yeah, and also, let me give you your phone number again, 540-720-5656. You can call that number anytime as well and leave your contact information. And ILG Financial will definitely get back with you and set up a time so you can have that conversation.
Yep, sure will. So let's get back to the numbers, right? It's definitely something you were talking about, making some plan to cover these potential costs. And it should absolutely be a core part of your retirement plan, right? It should be discussed in depth. Don't worry about it that it's uncomfortable to talk about death or long-term care. Uncomfortable is not a part of it. We just want to unemotionally look at the numbers, just like we were looking at the grocery bill. Remember, with this not-so-fun news comes a solution if you're willing to talk about it and plan ahead.
Okay.
Right? And let's talk about some of those solutions. Well, one of them is, a lot of people have already heard of what's called health savings accounts, which are something that many people, not everyone, has access to. They're a fantastic option to start saving now, even if you're working. If you're working and you have what's called a high deductible health care plan, meaning it's a very big deductible, you're eligible for these health savings accounts. It's just an account where you can save extra money to use later for long-term care or health insurance costs. Mm-hmm. But they're very attractive because you get a deduction on the money that you put in. It grows tax deductible. And then if you use it for health insurance costs or health costs down the road, it comes out tax-free. It's really the only account available that's got that triple tax benefit. No tax deduction going in. You get a tax deduction going in. No taxes while it grows. And then when you pull it out down the road, you don't pay tax on it. So know that health savings accounts are only available to people who have what are called high deductible health plans. If you're not sure, reach out to us. We can tell you if they're available. But that's one option.
Yeah, I would definitely want to know if I were eligible for that, because that sounds like a really good deal.
Now, the trade-off, of course, is like IRAs. You're limited to how much you can put in, so especially if time's not on your side. It's a great thing for a young person to take advantage of, and we can talk about how your children or friends that are younger should be taking advantage of that in this high tax rate environment now, and some tricks to maximize the tax advantages to a health savings account. But that's for another day, right? So that's one option, and it would only be a partial solution at best. You can also take of the money you've saved for retirement, we set aside some of your savings specifically for the goal of using them down the road for extra costs. And that would require us to earmark them for that purpose. And then, of course, that would dictate how we invest that money, because now there's new parameters that would govern how that money is going to be dispersed, right? So it would be invested very differently than money that you were, say, going to take out every month for living expenses, or money that you just wanted to grow down the road to pass on to your heirs. So we would earmark some of the money aside, put it in specific accounts with specific investment strategies designed to grow while you didn't need it, but be completely and 100% available when you did need it. The advantage to that, Ron, is that that money is still available for other stuff. So, if you got into your late 80s and you were still healthy and the bucket grew and you said, you know what, I don't think I need all of this money for long-term care down the road. Well, you can use it for a trip around the world or something, right? If you're lucky enough to die in your sleep, like my grandparents, and you never needed long-term care, well, they ended up needing it, but they did die in their sleep. But if you died in your sleep and didn't need long-term care, well, then the money can go to your heirs. So it's kind of a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, you mentioned this earlier, this particular phrase I like a lot. I think it's clear that this is another example of, as you say so many times, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm glad that you told everybody today.
Yeah, no, the goal here today is talk about the solutions always, right? The bad news comes front, but the good news is there's a lot of solutions. So self-funding is a great solution. There's different ways, all kinds of ways we can self-fund. And then, of course, most people have heard of traditional long-term care insurance, which, most people are not a fan of. I can tell you at our firm, we're not a huge fan of it. Now, there's a place for it, but we're not a big fan for the same reason most people aren't. It costs a lot of money. The premiums are expensive. They can and do go up over time, which can really hurt if you're on a fixed income in retirement, right, to see your premiums going up, like along with your health insurance premiums. And then, of course, there's the lousy news that if you're lucky enough to die in your sleep and don't need it, all that money that you paid in premiums was just down the drain. Right, but there are some times when that might be, needed in certain situations. But more often than not, we can find other solutions for folks. So with that said, know that there are several strategies available for covering these potential healthcare costs in retirement and allow you to avoid spending premiums on long-term care insurance and keep those premiums in your pocket and maybe use them for something fun. The challenge is that until you take the time to learn about the options, you're a bit in the dark, aren't you?
Absolutely. And
right. So what you want to do is you want to know about the amount of potential costs that are on the horizon. I hope we've done a good job of outlining those for you today. And if you don't have a plan to cover them, you want to start to build out a plan and go to your financial advisor. If you don't have one, call us and say, hey, listen, I listened to your podcast. Can you help me build out a plan to cover potential long-term care costs? We will absolutely do it. And many think that, prior to listening to this podcast, that long-term care insurance was the only option. So I either do it or I don't. That is absolutely not the case. There are several options, but the key is you've got to educate yourself. And then you've got to take the next step and build a viable plan that fits you, that may be very different than your neighbor. And that's what we do at ILG Financial, and we will help you with that if you'd like.
Thank you, Dave. Today on the podcast, we have talked about healthcare costs, and it can be really scary, particularly if you don't know all the options that are available to you, all the opportunities to plan for those long-term care expenses that you may have, or just health care costs in general. These are some scary numbers that Dave Lopez has put out there today. And Dave, thank you for educating all of us on this particular facet of retirement planning. There's so much other things to cover as well, and I hope that everybody will give your office a call and set up a time to have a conversation.
Hey, thanks for your time, Ron. Sure appreciate you.
Income, legacy, growth, it's all right here at ILG Financial, and it's about helping you plan for retirement your way so you can achieve your financial goals. Call ILG Financial at 540-720-5656 or go online to ilgfinancial.com to learn more. This has been the Retire Your Way podcast with Dave Lopez. I'm Ron Stutz. Thanks for listening.
The information provided is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. The views presented today are those of Dave Lopez and do not necessarily represent the views of the Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Investment advisory services offered through Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Alpha Star and ILG Financial, LLC are independent entities. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission, nor does it indicate that the advisor has attained a particular level of skill or ability.